Biker gang insulted old black man. He silently called in air support. The architecture firm's glass-walled conference room gleamed with modern sterility. 12 executives sat around the polished table, all white, all confident, their voices sharp with authority. In the corner, Malik Johnson sat perfectly still, his back straight, hands folded, face carefully composed. But beneath his calm exterior, his chest tightened with a familiar pressure. "Great pitch, Daniel," Mr. Palmer, the senior partner, nodded appreciatively. "This modular community housing, brilliant concept, clean, scalable." Malik blinked once, watching his own design flash across the projector. The curved facade, the precisely angled solar panels. 3 sleepless nights of work displayed before the room, with someone else's name attached. Daniel smiled, adjusting his cufflinks with, "Practice nonchalance. Thank you. I just thought, why not rethink low-income housing to feel high-end?" A soft, appreciative chuckle rippled through the room. Malik didn't move. He pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth. "Say something," his mind urged, but the words remained trapped. His heart thudded slow and heavy in his chest. It wasn't the first time. Last month it was the community center plan. Before that, the park redesign. Always his work, always someone else's name. He stared at the table, tracing the wood grain with his eyes as an unwelcome memory surfaced. 2nd grade. His teacher had leaned down after class. "Malik, try to speak properly, sweetheart. You don't want to sound rough." He had nodded then, embarrassed, not even knowing what he'd done wrong. He knew now. "Let's move on to the next proposal." "Someone," said, breaking through his thoughts. Malik raised his hand slightly. "Actually," the room paused, all eyes turned. He felt the shift, that sharp moment when people realize you're not staying quiet this time. He cleared his throat. "That housing model, that was my design." Silence descended over the room like a heavy curtain. Daniel chuckled nervously. "You had the first draft, yeah, but I, developed the concept more fully." Mr. Palmer looked at Malik, eyebrows drawing. "Together. Teamwork, gentlemen, let's not get caught up in credits." A burn started in Malik's chest. Not anger, not yet. Something older, something deeper. He forced a smile. "Right. Teamwork." They moved on. The moment passed. For them. For Malik, it stuck like gum on a shoe. He sat back, feeling smaller somehow, as if the air itself had turned heavy. Outside the window, the skyline gleamed, buildings like glass teeth, sharp and proud. He'd once dreamed of designing towers like that. Not anymore. Now he just wanted to build something that couldn't be taken from him. As the meeting ended, people stood, joked, patted Daniel on the back. Malik stood too, slower. "You good, man?" someone asked, glancing his way. "Yeah," Malik said. "I'm fine." He wasn't. He walked out into the hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A thought came, clear and steady. If you stay quiet, they get to keep taking. He didn't know what he'd do next. Not yet. But something inside had shifted. The silence wasn't safe anymore. The studio was nearly silent except for the soft scratch of Malik's pencil against tracing paper. The lights overhead flickered, faintly. Most of the team had gone home hours ago, but Malik stayed, like he always did, hunched over his desk in the corner by the window. His hands moved, but his mind wasn't fully there. He stared at the drawing, clean lines, modern angles, but it felt hollow. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. His eyes drifted to the framed photo tucked beside his monitor. It was old, slightly faded. His grandmother's front porch, carved railings, deep oak wood, vines trailing the steps. He could almost smell the mix of pine and lemon oil she used to wipe down the banister. That house wasn't fancy, but it had soul. Every creak in the floor, every curve in the molding told a story. His first memories of design weren't in any classroom. They were in that living room, sitting cross-legged on her rug, flipping through her old magazines and sketching houses with crayon. He looked down at his blueprint again. All edges, all profit, no soul. Later that evening, Malik drove across town. The roads narrowed, streetlights flickered in soft orange pools. He pulled up outside the same porch from the photo. The paint was peeling now, but it still stood tall, stubborn like his grandmother. She opened the door before he knocked. "I knew it was you," she smiled. "You got that heavy walk, like your daddy." Malik laughed, stepping inside. Guess some things don't change. The air inside smelled like cornbread and cedar. Soft gospel music played from the kitchen radio. She poured him sweet tea, then sat across from him, hands folded. "You look tired, baby," she said, eyeing him carefully. "I am," he admitted. "Feels like I'm building things that don't mean anything." She nodded slowly. "You remember what I told you when you were 10? When you built that little cardboard church with the popsicle stick roof?" Malik smiled. "You said it was crooked." "I said it was honest," she corrected. "And I said, build something no one can take from you." He was quiet for a moment. "I forgot that," he said softly. She reached out, gently touched his wrist. "Shiny buildings ain't always built to hold you. Sometimes they built to replace you." Those words hit deep. Malik thought about the firm's skyscrapers, the clean marketing words, revitalization, modernization, but all he saw were homes torn down, culture paved over. "I think I lost myself trying to fit in," he said. His grandmother smiled. "Then find yourself again, brick by brick." That night, Malik sat in his car for a while before starting the engine. As he drove off, a single question echoed in his mind. Who am I really building for? The answer wasn't clear yet, but the blueprint was starting to change. The boardroom buzzed with low conversation, leather chairs creaking as people adjusted their posture. Malik adjusted his collar and flipped through the sleek presentation booklet. He'd designed himself. Floor plans, light concepts, flow. It was his vision, weeks of work. Today was supposed to be a big moment. The client walked in, all charm and polished shoes. People laughed too loud at his jokes as if trying to win something invisible. Malik stayed composed. He stood when it was his turn. "So, here's the layout that reflects both community use and modern needs," Malik began. "We focused on hold." The client interrupted. "Is this the same plan Evan showed me last week?" Evan, his colleague, smiled awkwardly. "I think Malik added some touches." Malik blinked. "Added touches? He designed the whole thing." "I actually developed the base structure," Malik said, trying to stay calm. "From concept to draft." The client waved a hand dismissively. "Well, either way, it's nice. Clean. Didn't expect that level of polish. You sure you're from the inner city?" Laughter scattered across the table. A few chuckles, a cough, then silence. Malik's heart thudded. His mouth went dry. He looked around. No one said anything. Not the senior architect, not Evan. Not even his mentor, Daniel, who just cleared his throat and looked at his watch. Malik sat down slowly. Afterward, in the hallway, Malik pulled Daniel aside. "Did you hear what he said?" Daniel shrugged. "Yeah, look, clients can be awkward. Don't take it personally, it's just business." Malik stared at him. "Awkward? That was racist." Daniel sighed. Malik let it go. "We landed the client, didn't we?" The hallway suddenly felt colder. That evening, Malik stepped into the rain without an umbrella. Cold drops pelted his shoulders, soaking through his blazer. He didn't care. As he walked down the empty streets, the lights of the office building faded behind him. His mind replayed the moment over and over. His voice being brushed aside, the joke, the laughter, the silence. It wasn't the joke that hurt the most. It was the quiet. It was being in a room full of eyes that looked right through him. He stopped. Under a streetlight. Rain trickled down his face, but he didn't wipe it away. Something inside him had cracked, not like glass shattering, but like a fault line opening. Slow, deep, irreversible. He thought about his grandmother's words again. Shiny buildings aren't always built to hold you. He wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of shrinking to fit in. Tired of laughing things off. Tired of pretending it didn't matter. Malik turned the corner. his soaked shoes slapping against the pavement. No more pretending. That part of him was gone. Malik sat on the park bench, a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand. The city hummed around him, but his thoughts were louder. Jerome leaned back beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "So, they laughed?" Jerome asked. Malik nodded. "Yeah. No one said anything, not even Daniel." Jerome shook his head slowly. "That's not just a bad moment, man, that's racism." Malik sighed. "I don't know if I'd go that far." "Why not?" Jerome turned to him. "Because you don't want to be that guy? The one who speaks up and makes everyone uncomfortable?" Malik didn't answer. Jerome kept going, voice calm but firm. "They erased your work. Then they mocked you. And everyone. They acted like that was normal. Call it what it is." Malik stared down at his coffee. The heat had left it, just like the fire inside him, until now. Later that day, back at the office, Malik stayed late. The hum of computers and the scratch of pens echoed faintly. Most desks were empty. He heard footsteps behind him. It was Tiana, the new intern, black, barely 20, bright eyes and fast sketches. She hesitated before speaking. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. Sure. "Did they ever do that to you too?" Malik looked up. "Do what?" "You know," she said, eyes darting nervously. "Talk over you. Act like your ideas aren't yours." He paused, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, more than once." She looked down. I was imagining it." Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't want to be difficult. I just want to be good at this." "You are," Malik said. "Don't let them make you small." She smiled faintly and walked away. Malik sat frozen for a long moment. He saw himself in her, young, eager, careful, and slowly being chipped away. When he got home that night, Malik opened his laptop. He started typing. Racial demographics in architecture firms. The numbers stared back at him like a wall. Only 2% of licensed architects in the U.S. were black. Less than 0.5% were black women. He read about barriers, stories, studies. Every line felt like it echoed his life. He thought of his grandmother's words again. Build something no one can take. But how could you build anything when the foundation was already cracked? Malik closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. For the first time, the silence around him didn't feel like peace. It felt like surrender. He wouldn't stay quiet anymore. He didn't have a plan, but he had a truth. And sometimes, that's where change starts. Malik stared at the blinking cursor. The office was quiet, only the soft hum of fluorescent lights above. He read over the email one last time. Each word had weight, facts, incidents, statistics. His signature sat bold at the bottom. He clicked send. The letter had taken 3 nights. It detailed everything, his work being credited to others. Microaggressions passed off as jokes, the silence in meetings, the pattern of exclusion. He'd backed it up with research, diversity data from national surveys, even firm-wide observations. At the end, he'd offered suggestions, mentorship programs, third-party bias training, transparent credit practices. It wasn't a rant. It was a blueprint for change. By the next morning, HR had responded. A meeting was scheduled. Friday, 10 a.m., conference room 2. Malik showed up early. He wore his best shirt, pressed slacks. If they were going to look at him like a problem, he'd show up as a professional they couldn't dismiss. Inside, a woman from HR smiled too tightly. "We appreciate your courage in bringing this forward," she began. 2 partners from the firm sat stiffly beside her. One scribbled in a notebook. The other just looked bored. Malik listened carefully. "We take these concerns seriously," she continued. "We're committed to creating a more inclusive environment." He waited for specifics. There were none. They talked about fostering dialogue, about culture shifts, about maybe forming a diversity committee. Then the real line came. "We'd love for you to be involved in helping lead that effort." Malik's face didn't move. "So," he said calmly, "you want me to fix the thing that's been breaking me?" The room was still for a second. One partner cleared his throat. "We just think your perspective could help guide us." "No," Malik said, standing. "What would help is accountability, not more emotional labor." He gathered his notebook. "I'm not your lesson plan." The HR woman opened her mouth, but he was already at the door. Out in the hallway, Malik walked slowly. His heart beat steady, not fast, not angry, clear. That meeting hadn't been for solutions. It had been damage control, a performance dressed up in corporate speak. But this moment right here was real. Later that night, Malik stood on the subway platform, his reflection rippling in the glass. The city roared past in tunnels below. In his hand was a folded copy of his letter, printed and underlined. He thought about his grandmother's warning. Not all progress is growth. And he understood now. Real change doesn't happen when you're waiting for permission. It happens when you draw your own line and decide not to step back. Monday morning came with an email. The subject line read, "Promotion opportunity." Malik stared at it for a long time before clicking. It was full of corporate praise, how the partners had noticed his contributions, how they believed he was ready for more visibility. A seat at the table, they said. A bigger role, they said, but no mention of his letter. No acknowledgement of what he'd risked by speaking up. Just an offer dressed like a reward, masking their refusal to change. He closed the email. By evening, Malik was at his grandmother's house. The familiar creak of her old screen door greeted him, followed by the scent of slow-cooked greens and wood polish. Her home always felt warm, like a place the world couldn't touch. She sat in her worn armchair, flipping through a leather-bound photo album. "I pulled this out for you," she said, patting the cushion beside her. Malik sat down, the album between them. She turned to a faded black-and-white photo. A tall man stood in front of a small brick house, tools in hand, sleeves rolled up. "That's your great-granddaddy," she said softly. "Built that house with his own hands. During Jim Crow, they wouldn't let him work for the big companies, so he made his own way." Malik traced the man's image with his eyes. "He used to say," she continued, "they can close their doors. I'll build my own." The words landed like bricks in Malik's chest. He looked around her house. The careful molding on the walls, the hand-carved, trim around the windows, all built with pride, all still standing. "I'm tired, Grandma," Malik finally said. "Tired of trying to prove I belong in rooms that don't want me." She nodded, eyes steady. "Then maybe it's time to stop knocking," she said. The next morning, Malik walked into the firm with his shoulders back. No hesitation, no doubt, just clarity. He passed the conference room, same glass walls, same cold silence, and slipped his resignation letter onto the director's desk. No announcement. No goodbye speeches, just a clean break. As he stepped out of the office for the last time, the heavy glass door behind him clicked shut. It didn't feel like failure. It felt like freedom. Outside, the city was loud and alive. People moved fast. Cars honked, clouds shifted. Malik took a long breath, then reached into his coat pocket. His great-grandfather's photo was folded there, warm from his hand. The firm had offered him a seat at a table that was never really his. He'd chosen something better, a future on his own terms. That door they used to keep him out, he was the one. Closing it now, and this time it echoed like a beginning. 6 months had passed since Malik walked away from the firm. The air in his new office was different, fresh, a little chaotic, but full of possibility. It wasn't as sleek as the high-rise he used to work in. The walls were bare and the furniture was mismatched. But there was energy here, the kind of energy that came from people building something real, something of their own. Malik's team was small, just a handful of BIPOC creatives. Each person brought something unique to the table, whether it was a fresh perspective on design or a passion for community that matched Malik's own. Together, they'd formed a firm focused on what other companies ignored: underserved neighborhoods, spaces for people who hadn't been seen or heard in the industry. The city outside their windows buzzed with life, but inside, there was a quiet sense of purpose. Malik had turned down corporate contracts, choosing instead to work on projects that mattered: affordable housing, community centers, designs that felt like they were made for the people who would use them, not just the ones who could pay for them. That afternoon, Malik was invited to speak at a local youth event. He stood in front of a crowd of high school students, most of them from backgrounds just like his own. The auditorium was packed, filled with hopeful faces. A few years ago, he would have been in one of those seats, wondering if his dreams were even possible. But now he was standing in front of them, sharing his story. "Listen," Malik said, his voice steady but strong. "I'm going to be real with you. The world doesn't always make space for you to succeed. They'll tell you to fit in, to follow the rules. But what if those rules weren't meant for you? Don't just fit into the system. Build your own." The students were quiet, their eyes locked on him. Malik could feel the weight of their attention, the hope they carried in their hearts. This was the future he was building for. One where kids, like them, didn't have to shrink themselves to make others comfortable. He paused, looking across their faces. "You've got more power than you think. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The room was silent for a moment, and then, as if on cue, a ripple of applause spread through the crowd. It wasn't loud or boisterous, but it was sincere. Malik smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. When he returned to the office, the team was hard at work, sketching ideas for a community center in a neighborhood that had been neglected for decades. They had deadlines, they had challenges, but they also had something no one could take from them: purpose. It wasn't perfect. The firm wasn't perfect. Some days felt like they were running uphill, fighting an industry that wasn't ready for the change they wanted to make. But Malik felt rooted now, like the work he was doing was an extension of the lessons he'd learned, the pain he'd carried, and the people who had helped shape him. As he sat at his desk, looking over blueprints, Malik remembered the words his grandmother had shared with him months ago. Build something no one can take. That's exactly what he was doing. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he wasn't standing alone. He was standing on something solid, something real, a foundation that couldn't be stolen, a vision that belonged to him, a future built with truth as its cornerstone. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning the game, it's changing the rules.